The Baltimore Ravens sign Melvin Gordon and might be signing Kyle Van Noy. We talk about the Ravens. Very busy Friday and so much more coming up next here on this live instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, or nightly here if you're here with me on this Friday night. I'm your host, Kevin Ostraker of Ravens Wire. We're here on always the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making us your first listen each and every day or night, of course, free and available all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube. And this is a very special Locked On Ravens. It's actually the first live show we've done in a while here, and it's on a Friday night. So, you could be out partying, could be at a concert, but if you're here with me tonight or wherever you're listening, whenever, I appreciate you diving into this really busy Friday for the Ravens. I had plans for Friday, and obviously NFL teams, they don't care about your plans, right? They'll go sign people when they want to. It's on their schedule. So we'll talk Melvin Gordon. We'll talk about the move, what it means for the offense, for J.K. Dobbins, for Gus Edwards. Then we'll get into Kyle Van Noy a little bit, because I do think that with Kyle Van Noy, there's a lot to like about him. But also I feel like with him in particular, there's a lot that other pass rushers that are on the market don't have that he does. And it's going to be really interesting to see if this is the guy the Ravens ultimately end up going with, because they could go a bunch of different directions. We'll talk about Kyle Van Noy in the second segment. Then finally, we will move into the Ravens moves that they made over the course of Friday transactionally. So we'll actually talk a bit about the guys they placed on the PUP list. We'll talk about the guys that they ended up moving to different lists and get into what that means for, J.K. Dobbins, Rashad Bateman, and some of those players. So without any further ado, let's first get into Melvin Gordon. And actually, if you're here with us live on YouTube, you can turn notifications on so you know when our content comes out. You can type in the comments and I'll be able to see what you're saying in there, respond to you in there. So the live shows are really cool because of the ability that we're able to do that. And, it's kind of live. So producing it live and doing everything, it's really fun to be able to do that. So let's get into Melvin Gordon, a move that the Ravens have been linked to Melvin Gordon last offseason. I did a show with Kadri Ismail on it last offseason. And, we had kind of talked about, well, they don't really need Melvin Gordon. They have J.K. Dobbins coming off of injury, Gus Edwards off of injury as well. And, it was something where I said, cool, but I don't know, thanks. And then Gordon's 2022 season happened. And let's just say Melvin Gordon's 2022 season was not great. 90 attempts, 318 yards, 2 touchdowns for the Broncos, 3.5 yards per attempt, had trouble with fumbles as he does now. Something about Melvin Gordon and the fumbling issue, it's real. For a guy like John Harbaugh, who, absolutely despises, fumbling, mistakes, things that can cost you games. The signing was a little bit of a head scratcher because Melvin Gordon, since 2015, non-quarterback wise, I did not know you had to pay $20 per month for StatMuse. So, you're learning something new every day there. But on StatMuse, Melvin Gordon, non-quarterback wise, has the most fumbles in the league since 2015. I believe that number is 26, if I'm not mistaken. And that's it's a lot. Gordon is somebody who is going to cough the ball up, and he wasn't necessarily playable with Denver last year. It wasn't necessarily playable with Kansas City, signed to their practice squad, couldn't really make it off the practice squad. So this move is I don't think it means a ton, honestly, for the Ravens. Now, for me, it's funny. On Twitter, I posted the video of Melvin Gordon's Wisconsin highlights with, the Ravens are getting a dog in Melvin Gordon. And it was a joke. First of all, it was a joke. The reason I did it was because, short story, when Deshaun Jackson signed with the Ravens, I posted a video of his longest catches. The first catch was from 2009. And all I said, no opinion, was this is the Ravens' newest wide receiver in Deshaun Jackson. And everybody got on me. The quote tweets were, these Obama administration highlights, like Modern Warfare 2 was and I thought I was laughing. I thought it was the funniest thing. And so now when a veteran signs, I tweet old highlights with that caption as a joke. Now, some people do not understand that, and I get it, right? I had to clarify. But Gordon, to me, was one of those perfect opportunities, but I don't think he's a better player than J.K. Dobbins. I don't think he's a better player than Gus Edwards. I honestly think Justice Hill can probably contribute more than him at this stage. But look, maybe it's just a camp body deal. I feel like Baltimore, it doesn't, the specs of the deal actually were 1 year, what was it, like up to 3.1 million. So incentives, that's interesting because it's when a deal is up to a certain number, that usually means there are incentives that a guy could reach. So Josina Anderson, who was very plugged in and honestly was one of the best sources to follow for the Lamar Jackson situation, ended up talking about how the Ravens don't necessarily view this as a thing that impacts J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards. It was more of we're adding a really good football player to our team. Now, I don't know what 30-year-old Melvin Gordon's going to give you at this stage. It's weird because, we're talking about the state of the running back position right now with Saquon and Josh Jacobs not getting their long-term deals. Dalvin Cook is still out there. Zeke Elliott still out there. And the Ravens sign Melvin Gordon. So, this is a move, it's a C move for me. I'm not really totally excited about it. If you were talking, Melvin Gordon was my guy. He was I don't know if anybody else felt this way, but Melvin Gordon was my guy coming out of Wisconsin. He was my favorite running back in that class. He was in that Todd Gurley draft class, but I don't know. He's not it at this stage in his career. And let's take a look at the comments quickly here. Justin P saying, "Hey Kevin, what's up, Justin? How you doing? I hope you have a good weekend in store. I appreciate you tuning in." And Nick D saying, "Is Melvin Gordon edition going to tick off JK or Gus?" I don't think so, because I don't think it's going to have an impact on their carries, honestly. Maybe here and there it will, but I don't think it's going to tick them off. I guess it's a veteran in the locker room at the position. Do they necessarily need one? I don't know, but we'll see what happens. Felix says Butterfinger hands. Yeah, not catching the ball. He's a fumbler. So hopefully that goes away. But it's been a constant throughout his entire career. He's 30 years old. It's been a trend for him. Unfortunately, that's probably what it is. Nick saying maybe he just is to get by for the preseason games to preserve the starters. That could be. Honestly, I don't expect JK to play this preseason. We'll kind of get into that in the final part of the show. Would not be shocked if Gus Edwards doesn't play in the preseason. So maybe this is a situation where you start Justice Hill, you play Melvin Gordon in the middle section, and then maybe Keaton Mitchell rounds it out in the preseason. I like that idea. That's a good thought there by Nick. And yeah, Nick says 7 or 8 years ago he was hot. He was my guy, especially those early Charger days. And I know that the clip of him fumbling, and it was a fumble, by the way, in that 2018 wild card game at the goal line when Marlon Humphrey returned it for a touchdown. 100% a fumble. It was ridiculous. They called him down there. My hot take, and I have plenty of them, the Ravens win that game if Melvin Gordon doesn't fumble, or if that call is actually a fumble and they don't call Melvin Gordon down, because Marlon Humphrey takes that back to the house. And we saw Lamar Jackson almost will that team, Michael Crabtree, honestly, will that team to a win. But yeah, this Melvin Gordon move, to me, kind of shocking it happened. And honestly, I was expecting some movement on the Dewan Smoot front, but not the way we got it today, right? Dewan Smoot was projected. He was expected to visit the Ravens. And then, we get a notification this morning that says, he's signing back in Jacksonville. So maybe that was a leverage play. Seems like it was a leverage play by Dewan Smoot to, maybe re-sign with his team that he's familiar with. But the Ravens are apparently already moving on to what could be possibly better things. So we'll talk about that in the second segment. But for Melvin Gordon, over the course of his career, this is an accomplished player. Came in the league in 2015, obviously out of Wisconsin, 1,567 attempts, 6,462 yards, 4.1 yards per carry, 55 touchdowns. Now, as a receiver, because we know the Ravens want to get their guys involved, at least, the running backs involved in the pass game a little more, is not going to bring you he's not a 50 catch per year guy, but he was he was from 2016 to 2019. He was a 40-50 catch guy. Now with the snap rate decreasing, the usage rate going down, and just his age overall, he's about a 30 catch guy. So he can give you catches out of the backfield, hovers right around 75% catch percentage. So he's somebody that at this point I don't expect to have a huge role. He's not a lock for the roster at this point. He could very well just be, as Nick said, a preseason body, get you through the preseason games, and then that's that. But in this case, it's a low risk signing, like the incentive laden contract. If it's not, here's the thing. If it's not, how do I say it? If it's not, I would say probably forcing the Ravens to move off of their other needs, then I think it's like, whatever, like fine. It's not a move that I'm super excited about, but it's a move that I feel like, if there's an injury, here's what could happen. The Ravens could bring in Melvin Gordon, and this could be like their Mike Davis signing where they have him on the roster to start the season because other guys will go on, maybe injured reserve or the PUP list. And maybe they want to manage, because we don't really know the situation with J.K. Dobbins right now with the hold in or hold out or injury or whatever. Gus Edwards, how is he going to fare? Maybe this is a situation where the Ravens are just deciding to bring in a guy for the first 4 weeks, 6 weeks of the season, and then maybe cut him after that when guys become available off of IR. Would I have done that? Probably not, but I don't know. We'll see. Fred Anthony saying, what's JB's injury status? JK? Fred, do you mean JK's injury? If you're talking JK, I don't know. JB, is there an initial? Am I missing something? Is there a guy with JB initials and I'm missing it? We'll come back to it. But Fred, if you're saying JK, well, I don't really know. We're kind of left in the dark right now about what's going on with JK. We'll talk about what the Ravens announced in the final part of the show, but we'll see. I don't know. I don't think it's a bad sign for JK that Melvin Gordon's getting brought in because we have heard the reports that they just feel like they're adding a good player to the team. But how much of that is the team feeding that, and then how much of it is actually true, we'll see. Justin saying, I like the Melvin Gordon signing. He just needs to hold on to the ball. And then Justin saying, if we can sign Kyle Van Noy or Clowney, I'll be happy. And then the other side, Robbie coming in saying, don't like this move at all. So definitely two sides. I'm in the middle. I really just don't think it impacts much. Like if we're being completely honest, I don't think it impacts much. Some people, I think, are really on the side of they don't like it because they feel like Melvin Gordon's going to play a huge amount of snaps or it's going to take away from JK or Gus Edwards. If anything, maybe it takes away 20 carries early in the season, and maybe that can have an impact. Maybe it takes away 5 catches. I don't know. But I just, it's a C tier move for me. I'm not getting too worked up over it. I think it's something that's just honestly, I feel like he'll be a camp body. He'll get cut. And then maybe he'll sign to the practice squad and they'll have that depth there. But then maybe it's a battle between Keaton Mitchell and Melvin Gordon for the 4th spot on the roster running back wise if they keep that many. So it's interesting. We'll see what happens with it, but we'll coming up in the second segment. We'll be talking about Kyle Van Noy and if he's the next addition to the Ravens, what he could bring. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to talk about on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about eBay Motors. And for those who are fantasy people, I'm a big fantasy guy, and I'll do a little plug here for the Locked On Ravens fantasy leagues. We're doing those. I've done them for the past couple of years here. We'll do those. It's super exciting, but I'm excited for this. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. And so there's a ton of draft prep, right? I'm prepping for dynasty drafts and other fantasy drafts. So if you're prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week, we're going to provide you the players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with that prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us for this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And we'll go with the final bunch here, Davante Adams and Patrick Mahomes. Now, Davante Adams, if you have the turn picks, which, maybe you have the 10th pick and the 11th pick, the 12th pick and the 13th pick, I personally don't really like that, but sometimes if you're doing a random draft order, it happens. You can pick some guaranteed assurance performers by going all AFC West with the Raiders, wide receiver Davante Adams, and Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes. Adams has proved he remains a reliable top selection in Las Vegas. Well, Mahomes obviously is going to operate with both the highest floor and ceiling among the standout luxury options at his position. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship at eBay Motors. Notice your championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle as well. eBay Guaranteed Fit in over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right to your fingertips. You can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, they have it all over there. Tail lights, alternators, shock struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. If you're a car guy or a truck guy, head over to eBay Motors. They'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what parts you need for your vehicle the first time. So go for switch gears, crank up the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up because now you'll know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check at the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items will exclusions apply. We're back here, our second part of Locked On Ravens live edition here on Friday night. I appreciate everybody tuning in with me here. Of course, I'm Kevin Oestreicher. We do a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast, though, just a little shameless plug, Monday through Friday, right around 6 a.m. Eastern time. If you're in every day or you tune in every single day, thank you so much for being here. If this is your first time in, welcome in. I hope you enjoy the content, enjoy the channel. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. It's free and available, so no money involved here. But let's talk about Kyle Van Noy. Actually, if you're watching on YouTube, I spelled it on the graphic, Kyle Van Noy. And he is not Kyle Van. Let me change that around. I'll do a little live. This is what happens. You're doing it live. So let me change the graphic. But he is not Kyle Van Noy. He is Kyle Van Noy, because I feel like for Kyle Van Noy, there it is. I fixed it. Kyle Van Noy is somebody that I'm really excited about, the possibility. Right after Melvin Gordon signed, we got the news that Kyle Van Noy was visiting the Ravens. I think that there was a little confusion at first whether he actually signed or not with the Ravens, but it was just a visit because, as I talked about in the first part of the show, DeJuan Smoot, everybody thought, he's coming for a visit next week for the Ravens. Feels like Baltimore's a strong option, Ian Rappaport said. And then all of a sudden, DeJuan Smoot this morning goes back to Jacksonville on Friday, and everyone's like, oh, all right. Like, DeJuan Smoot is the newest induction into the Ravens Legend Hall of Fame. And for those who don't know, the Ravens Legend thing is kind of like a joke where Ravens Legend means like they did nothing for the organization or it was short-lived or we've talked about them as an option for years. Like, the Ravens Legend, like Julio Jones is a Ravens Legend because of how much we talk. Remember that? How much everybody talked about Julio. Antonio Brown's another one of those guys. So DeJuan Smoot's a Ravens legend. But Kyle Van Noy is someone that, when you're talking about who's available, we've obviously talked about Justin Houston. We've obviously talked about guys like Yannick Ngakoue, Jadeveon Clowney. Van Noy is super interesting. A Super Bowl champion. He has championship experience. Now, he's someone who can play both inside and outside. He's super, super versatile, and he's actually a 2-time Super Bowl champion. I don't want to disrespect him or anything, but he can play inside or outside. Not that the Ravens need inside linebacker depth, but it does, if he does sign, does give Mike Macdonald a little bit of an extra wrinkle that he can use. 33.5 sacks over the course of his career, came into the league in 2014. Actually, funny enough, has the same amount of sacks over the last 4 seasons as DeJuan Smoot does, 22.5. And somebody that is kind of, I guess you could call it bounced around, has played on 3 teams in 3 years, but really found a home in New England from 2016 to 2019. But then he's kind of moved all over the place. And he played inside linebacker New England, played inside linebacker and outside linebacker Miami, played some inside linebacker back in New England too under Belichick, and played outside linebacker for the Chargers. Now, when 17 games for the Chargers last year, had 5 sacks, 16 games for the Patriots in 2021, 5 sacks. But to me, it's really interesting because I feel like he's a safe option and someone who is also really good in just being a smart and savvy football player. He knows how to play the game. He's been a steady presence everywhere he goes. He's a very low mistake player. And I feel like he has whenever you watch him, you watch the tape, you watch the highlights, he has a feel for the game, which is really important in terms of a young linebacker room. Well, inside linebacker, you're fine, right? But outside linebacker, it's really important with guys like Odafe Oweh and David Ojabo. So I'm all for this if it happens. Van Noy would not break the bank for the Ravens. Maybe it'd be less than what Melvin Gordon got, which would honestly be kind of crazy. I'm like meh on Melvin Gordon. I'm all in. I'm all in on Kyle Van Noy. Now, I'd be okay with Justin Houston. I'd be okay with Jadeveon Clowney. Yannick Ngakoue, I think people are kind of turned off to Ngakoue because of what happened a couple years ago, obviously, when the Ravens traded for him. But he just wasn't a fit in Don Martindale's system. I feel like he'd be much better of a fit with Mike Macdonald, but maybe that bridge is already kind of burned, whether it's from the Ravens or from Ngakoue's side. I wouldn't expect that reunion personally. But Van Noy, to me, let's look at the pass rush room if he signs. It's Odafe Oweh, David Ojabo, Tyus Bowser, Van Noy, and Tavius Robinson. Maybe you could make a case that they could bring back a Justin Houston, and that would maybe bring them probably it'd be solid both veteran-wise and young player-wise. I'm a very big proponent. Well, I think it's really important for teams to have a balance, not too young at any position, but you don't want to go super, super old. You want to have a very balanced room. We know outside linebackers a need. We know this team needs to bring in somebody, and it definitely feels like what the Ravens are doing right now is kicking the tires on a lot of guys. Maybe they just feel like they want to get a little younger And I think you can get younger at any position with the age Justin Houston is. But maybe they look at Justin Houston, they see what happened in the second part of the season, where if you remember, Justin Houston had that, what was it, like it was a 10 sack incentive. It was like $1 million or 500,000 or something. He had 9.5 sacks over the course of the first, like 8-9 games before the bye. And then the second half of the season, he had 0.5. He missed out on his sack number by 0.5 sacks. 9 sacks the first part of the year, 0.5 the second part of the year. So while Van Noy is not, he's not a 28-year-old guy, he's not super, super young. You're still bringing in a 32-year-old player. He is younger than Justin Houston. I think you don't have to manage his snaps as much. He can play on rundowns too, which is really important. Dewan Smoot was not good against the run. Kyle Van Noy is better against the run. Justin Houston was fine against the run, but at this stage of Justin Houston's career, you don't want to have him playing all those downs. You want to use him in situational pass rushing situations. It's almost like the thing we were talking about with Calais Campbell for so long, while he was in Baltimore, was every single season it was you want to make sure the snaps go down, but you can level out the production because of the fact that you're managing the snaps the right way and he's fresher for longer. By the time December, January, hopefully February roll around, obviously that didn't happen, but by the time those later months roll around, you want to have the ability to have those guys stay fresh. With Van Noy, I would say that is less than an issue, or less of an issue with a guy like a Van Noy than a Justin Houston. Van Noy is also someone who has been pretty durable over the last couple of seasons. His, 17 games last year, 16 in 2021, 14 in 2020, 15 in 2019, 16 in 2018. So a couple missed games here and there, but not necessarily a ton of missed games here and there. So in terms of keeping guys available on the field, plus the fact that we're not sure what Odafe Oweh and David Ojabo are going to bring, right? We just don't. Maybe they hit. We hope they do. There's optimism definitely surrounding David Ojabo, but also surrounding Odafe Oweh for how those guys can perform with high level and high important snaps. But let's say it doesn't pan out. They're going to need somebody who they can rely on, who is proven at, the NFL level and has been proven for a very long time. You need someone like that. So to me, I've kind of said for the past couple of months, ever since Rock Ya-Sin was signed, to me, edge is the bigger need than corner, right? Because I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot to talk about with, what happens after Marlon Humphrey or Rock Ya-Sin goes down. If Marlon Humphrey goes down, the whole room is kind of cooked, regardless of who you bring. Unless it's a Jair Alexander type of player, you're not really gonna have the ability to recover or at least get the same production that you would from Marlon Humphrey. But you can still recover if you lose, an Odafe Oweh and you have to bring in a Kyle Van Noy or a Justin Houston or a Jadeveon Clowney. You're not sunk there. It's not a sunk cost. Humphrey's Jets Rebeck said, and I agree with him, I've been preaching this, that Marlon Humphrey is the most important player on the Ravens outside of Lamar Jackson in terms of they cannot lose him. If you lose a David Ojabo, you lose an Odafe Oweh, you lose a Tyus Bowser, yeah, it's not going to be fun, right? You'd rather not. You'd rather have those guys stay available for the year. But Van Noy is enough for me in that situation. So let's look at the comments quickly before we head into our final break. We have one from Nick going back to Melvin Gordon saying Melvin Gordon does have high reception yards and Monken does like throwing to running backs. I think that's part of the reason why the Ravens actually did this and they signed Melvin Gordon, at least part of it, not the whole thing, but as I talked about, Melvin Gordon at this stage of his career is not going to get you probably 50 catches, but he can get you maybe 20 or 30 at this stage. So we're going to see J.K. Dobbins out of the backfield. We're going to see Gus Edwards out of the backfield as well. Maybe they bring Melvin Gordon as well out of the backfield if he makes the roster. That's the key thing, though. Then we have Justin saying we need to sign Dalton Reisner. I think Baltimore has enough offensive line depth right now. I mean, he'd be a solid depth piece, but I feel like they want to look at what they have. Look, if it doesn't work out and there's nobody, I feel like they want to see what they have with Saleh in a guy like Falele, maybe Ben Cleveland. But if it does not work out, Reisner's somebody who a lot of injury history, his play's kind of fallen off. He's had to kick inside the guard. Maybe that's an option. Nick saying another topic, pretty slick how the Ravens overpaid Beckham and priced Hopkins out of Kansas City's price range. I'm going to head into our final break with this one. We're going to talk about that on the final side of the show and also get into what the Ravens moves that they made outside of Gordon and the visit of Kyle Van Noy, talking about the guys that moved the PUP list, the did not report list, and more. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to talk about on this live edition of Locked On Ravens. We're back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens Friday night. Locked On Ravens After Dark, right? Kevin Oestreicher still here with you right about 10:20, 10:30 on this Friday night. Again, thank you for being here with me and talking Ravens on this Friday night. And I love all the engagement we have in chat here. We do these live streams every time the Ravens make a signing. So if the Ravens do sign Kyle Van Noy, we'll have a live stream. We'll talk about it. We'll do preseason after the game live streams. We'll do after regular season game live streams, instant reaction episodes. We're going to do that a lot more. And of course, we have our regular show Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time, about 30 minutes each and every weekday. So be sure to stay tuned, subscribe, follow along in audio form too. This will be available in audio form after the fact. Let's get into the conversation. We'll get into Nick's comment first and talk about what he had to say, because I talked about this on Monday. The Ravens, Nick said again, another topic, pretty slick how the Ravens overpaid OBJ and priced Hopkins out of Kansas City's price range. And it's exactly what happened, because I say that the Ravens did overpay Odell Beckham, but it was a necessary overpay and it was not a bad move. Just because they overpaid Odell does not mean that was a bad move for them. But it did essentially two things. It brought a receiver into Baltimore who, if you get low wide receiver 1, high wide receiver 2 production out of him, that's a win. But also from the reports, and we saw, this coming out, when was it? Like May, this stuff came out that the Chiefs and the Cardinals were about to make a trade for DeAndre Hopkins, and then the Ravens signed Odell, and Hopkins said, "Oh, hold up, hold on." And the Chiefs don't have cap space. So the Ravens effectively weakened other AFC contenders like the Bills, like the Chiefs, and the Titans got better, but I would much rather have DeAndre Hopkins go to Tennessee than I would have him in Kansas City or Buffalo. I would have loved him in Baltimore, but it just wasn't in the cards there. We have Jay Razier 15 saying, comment a yes if you take Kenyon Drake over Melvin Gordon any day of the week and twice on Sunday. we got a couple of yeses in the chat too on Drake over Gordon. Nick saying kind of even caliber minus the fumbles. Yeah, I mean, they're kind of even to me. Like either both signings did not move me when they happened. Like the Gordon signing today did not move me. The Drake signing back then did not move me. They're kind of the same caliber of player, in my opinion. But again, I think the thing that Drake has over Gordon is the fumbles were not there. And we saw Kenyon Drake have like a couple games of his life in Baltimore. So maybe Melvin Gordon can be the same thing. And we also, Jay Razor 15 saying, if we lose Marlon, the secondary is so screwed. Felix saying Kyle Van Noy can get to the quarterback. He can. He's a player that not only that, but with the inside versatility he has is really good. And Felix also was his Kai 8-Vin, because Kyle Van Noy was number 8 with the Chargers. So I get the reference with what Felix is trying to say with that. But we'll work on it. If Kyle Van Noy signs Felix, we'll revisit that and kind of get the play on words now. But let's talk about the Ravens moves, because it wasn't just Melvin Gordon, it wasn't just the Kyle Van Noy visit. The Ravens made 7 other roster moves on Friday, some of which do have some significance. So I'll go through them first. Baltimore placed Tyus Bowser on the non-football injury list, and John Harbaugh said at the end of minicamp that Bowser's knee had kind of flared up for some reason, and he actually, we know he returned from the Achilles surgery, but they just want to be cautious with that, so we'll see what happens there. They also placed 5 players on the physically unable to perform list in J.K. Dobbins, Patrick Ricard, Pepe Williams, Rashad Nichols, and Mike Thomas. And then they also said that, I think the move that got the most attention was that Rashad Bateman was placed on the reserve, did not report list. And we all know he got shut down for minicamp after getting the cortisone shot in his foot with the healing after those screws were released from his foot, because he had the screws in. The screws were then taken out. And then the cortisone shot was, I think, to help the healing and the pain after those screws were taken out. So that was a positive piece of news, but it's not a good piece of news that he was placed on the reserve, did not report list. But Eric Acosta did say that he's spoken to Rashad Bateman and they expect him here very soon. So it appears that, he's still rehabbing, still working to get back. With Tyus Bowser, that's, I'm not super worried about Tyus Bowser. Patrick Ricard had surgery. He was expected to not be fully ready back yet. So that one isn't necessarily super concerning. Pepe Williams, Rashad Nichols, Mike Thomas. I'm not super concerned about those guys. But I think the 2 guys that a lot of people are worried about right now, it's J.K. Dobbins and Rashad Bateman. Those are the 2 that so many people have, worried about. Really, for Dobbins, it's been since the injury, but kind of for different reasons, right? We've seen the cleanup surgery. We've seen the hold in. We'll presume, I don't think we ever got official confirmation on it. I keep saying that, but the presumed hold in and the contract situation, and now just like where his knee is at right now. And then Bateman's foot injury. Foot injuries are no joke. Like, those are really hard to come back from. And the fact that he was placed on this list, people are saying, well, where's his foot? Like, is he going to be ready? I'm not. So for Bateman, I think it's different for Bateman versus Dobbins to me, because I think that at this point, I'm not saying, oh, well, Bateman's going to miss the first part of the season. To me, I think that where my concern level will start to go up is if we get to the first preseason game and Bateman hasn't practiced yet. That's where I'll start to say, maybe something's going on. I don't know. But look, Eric DeCosta said that he expects Bateman to be there soon. So hopefully that's the case. Obviously, with Lamar's injury, John Harbaugh said he was going to play again. And the communication was not great between the team and the media and Lamar Jackson. And we know that situation was super, super messy. So hopefully, Bateman, it's not like I don't trust DeCosta, don't get me wrong there, but hopefully Bateman is ready to go for hopefully maybe a couple weeks in a training camp, right? That's what you want. Maybe by the time the joint practices happen with the Commanders, stadium practice, hopefully he'll be back then. Dobbins is the interesting one, though. Dobbins is the one where we just don't know what the heck's going on, right? We don't know what in the world's happening with J.K. Dobbins, because we know the knee injury. It took him a while to get back, and we saw he wasn't even fully back. He had to have the cleanup after returning in week 3, and then didn't look like himself on the field. So people are worried about, like, where is the knee right now? Because the way that it wasn't just the ACL. J.K. Dobbins said it was not just the ACL injury. It was a bunch of other ligaments within that knee, and that made the rehab and the comeback process so much more difficult for him. So there's a lot of other stuff, too, that goes into it, like the contract situation, and it's something that Kaji Ismail and I have talked about a lot with the hold-in or presumed hold-in, which is, again, how far is he going to take this thing, right? How far is it going to go? Was the hold-in, if it was that, was it just a minicamp thing where essentially he says, I'm just going to make a little statement here. I'm going to voice my displeasure with the offers that were made or whatever, or the dialogue that I've had with the team. Maybe that's what he was saying. Or is he really going to dig in his heels here and not report or this, that, and the other? Now, the reports are that Dobbins did report the training camp with a couple other veterans. So he is apparently there and ready. But the fact that he is now on the PUP list, is the knee going to be ready? I would not expect to see him at all in the preseason. I would be very shocked. Just like I would be shocked to see Lamar there. I'd be shocked to see a couple other guys there. But Dobbins is the one where I think a lot of, like, Bateman, you can say, fine. Like, we know what's going on with the cortisone shot. We got that information. Now it's just a matter of how the foot responds and how it works. But for Dobbins, we don't know, because John Harbaugh, if you remember at the end of minicamp, he did not seem very pleased with the fact that Dobbins wasn't out there. He thought that, something was, everything was fine. And then he said something flared up, or he didn't know why JK didn't practice, and he did not seem happy. So I don't know. I'm a little more worried about JK than I am with Rashad Bateman, but my concern levels, like for Bateman, I'm probably like a 3 out of 10 right now. For Dobbins, I'm probably a 4 or 5. I'm not in the panic zone. Like, I'm not in the 7-8 zone right now. But again, with every day that goes by and those guys aren't on the field, we'll see what happens. Nick also saying Ricard or Ben Mason. That's the thing. That actually, it's a good question. I've talked about this, because what's Ricard's role going to be in an offense that, the Greg Roman offense was the offense for Ricard. I'm not saying Ricard's not going to have a role in Todd Monken's offense, but Ben Mason, from all accounts, was performing really well as a pass catcher in OTAs and minicamp. So, at this point, do we maybe see the Ravens shift to a Ben Mason? Do they keep Ben Mason as a 4th tight end on the roster maybe and use him in fullback situations? If Ricard's not ready, I think Ben Mason would be a really solid option there. And also, Grandizer 12 saying Kyle Van Noy is a very good locker room leader. What he did for the Dolphins in his 1 year was often overlooked. He's like having another defensive coach. And that's great insight, because with those veterans, you want to have guys who are going to be available for the young guys, locker room presence, and someone who knows the game and can lead by example on the field, but also teach. Justin Houston was a great teacher. I'm not saying he's not going to come back, but if he is no longer a member of the Ravens, he was a great teacher. His teammates called him Yoda. If you get another guy in the locker room like that, who is a couple years younger, and maybe you don't have to manage the snaps as much, he can still contribute. That's a really great get for them. And then Jay Razier 15 saying, look out for Trenton Simpson taking Kyle Hamilton's nickel role from last year. He did it in college. And just imagine PQ, Roquan, and Simpson all flying around at the same time. Man, that'd be crazy, wouldn't it? Like, it'd be crazy if that happened, because the Ravens had a big nickel last year, and Trenton Simpson, despite being, I guess, listed as an inside linebacker, is not just that, right? He can fly all over the place and can play multiple positions. You can put him up top. You can put him out wide. You can put him everywhere you want to. So with a role that's not really defined for him right now, I don't know. I think it's really exciting to figure out what Hamilton's role is actually going to be. But, when also talking about where else these other guys can fit in, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Also, one other piece of news, Marcus Peters, as we've talked about, probably not coming back to Baltimore. He is on tap to visit with the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday, according to multiple reports. So feels like the Marcus Peters show in Baltimore has been up for a while now, actually, ever since Rock Ya-Sin came in. But if it officially happens next week, I would not be shocked whatsoever here. But we'll see what happens. The Ravens, it's exciting. Training camp starts next week. I was not necessarily expecting to have this Friday go the way it did, but hey, I'm excited. I'm glad we were able to talk some Ravens here in the live chat, everybody, and also for those who are listening after the fact, video form, audio form. Thank you for tuning in as well. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. And Grand User 12 said, hitting the like button to show support. Kevin Ostraker, I appreciate you so much. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and making me a part of your Friday night here. I hope everybody has a great weekend. We'll be back here on Monday with more Locked On Ravens. So tune in audio form, tune in video form, like, subscribe, the whole 9 yards. Thank you so much. And, of course, we'll be back here on Monday with more Ravens content on Locked On Ravens.